Welcome, everyone, to the Finance and Administration Committee on Thursday, June 15th, 2023. It is 9:30, and I am calling this meeting to order. As we gather this morning, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of this committee and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the First Nations. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history. We are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Ms. Wilson, has roll call been taken?
Through you, Chair, yes, roll call has been taken.
Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? I see none. Can I get an adoption of the minutes from the meeting from May 18th, 2023, please? Moved by the member from North Elgin-Wilberforce, seconded by the member from Killaloe, Haggerty, and Richards. Were there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And those pass. All right, and with that, I will ask Mr. Foss, look alive, sir, look alive, to introduce our delegation who is coming to us virtually, our new auditor, and I will pass that over to you, Mr. Foss.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the Finance Committee. We're very pleased to have with us this morning Lori Huber, who is a partner with KPMG. Committee will recall that 2022 was the first year of a 5-year engagement that we have with Lori and with her team, and we're very happy to have her join our meeting this morning. So, Madam Chair, I believe that at this point I will turn it over to Lori and ask her to present her auditor's report.
Please welcome Ms. Huber. Nice to see you, and thanks for taking on the County of Renfrew as your new client. And you can take us through your auditor's report, please.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here before you to share with you the highlights of our audit for fiscal 2022. And I will share my screen, and perhaps if you could just let me know, hopefully you see something on the screen that looks audit related, that would be good.
We definitely can. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to do this morning was first to say thank you for the confidence in our work in terms of our appointment as your external auditor for fiscal 2022. First year audits can somewhat be interesting, but I can assure you, based on the results of our findings, if you've had the opportunity to read through our report that was pre-circulated, it certainly really wasn't interesting at all. So that was really a good news sign. The team has been exceptionally cooperative. A lot of effort is part of a first year transition, but certainly had full cooperation, lots of great communication with the team. So certainly feeling quite confident in the relationship that we will continue to build. So in terms of our audit highlights, each of these captions are the things that I should be having discussions with you related to the audit. I'll go through a few of them in detail. The report is lengthy. As I said, there's not a lot of significance in terms to bring to your attention, so I will just jump on the pieces that I think are most relevant. So where we are today with respect to the audit, being mindful that this is the committee and ultimately council will accept and adopt and approve the financial statements, which I believe are slated for June the 28th, and I will physically be there in person on that day, which will be exciting. Hopefully I'll have an opportunity to meet a few of you, but we are at this stage subject to the discussion here today and ultimately the approval of council. We are essentially complete with no individual items to wrap up other than the ordinary customary items we would expect at this stage. The next slide speaks to our audit plan. I know we didn't formally come to the committee to present our audit plan, but I believe it was circulated as part of a package earlier in the year. This slide is meant to marry up the audit plan that we had thought we would do and what we ultimately did. So basically on the right-hand side, you can see there were no significant changes to our audit plan to alert yourselves being the committee. There were new things that were required to be implemented this year in terms of the new audit standard that is part of our report. It's not a KPMG audit standard. It was a new Canadian auditing standard related to the way that we as your external auditor make our risk assessment. So that was adopted and implemented this year, and certainly nothing significant to bring to your attention as well. As part of any financial statement audit, we are required by professional standards to incorporate the presumed risk of fraud in certain areas. certainly not unique to your organization at all. So we will continue to do that each and every fiscal year as part of our professional standards. And you can see there was nothing new in terms of findings there to bring to your attention. And that is another good news sign. In terms of the numbers themselves, we had set out as part of our audit plan to set out at an overall financial reporting materiality of $3 million, which is really a function of the volume of activity on your statement of operations. So based on that overall financial reporting materiality, to the extent we identified any differences in the accounts from what management provided to us versus what we thought we should have seen in the accounts, anything greater than $150,000 was really our posting threshold to have those conversations and ultimately determine where we landed. You'll see here at the bottom of the page, there was, and this is a little bit unique to explain, and hopefully I'll do my best. In our review of the previous year's financial statement audit file, so as part of the transition in 2022, we were required to review the 2021 audit files. And in there, we noticed a difference in the accounting from what was done versus what we would have expected to see. What it related to, primarily related to COVID funds and some of the Safe Restart monies. There were amounts that were sitting on your balance sheet or your statement of financial position at the end of 2021 that in our view should not have been. They should have been flowed through your income statement or your statement of operations and sitting in equity. So what they did this year, being management through discussions with us, they have made that change this year. So it is a timing difference year over year. However, I think the real moral of the story here is that at the end of fiscal 2022, all of the amounts are sitting where they need to be. So going forward into 2023, the books are clean. There's nothing out there lingering that is not corrected, which is why you see the impact here being nil at the end of the year. So save that one individual item, really, in terms of our view, certainly taking on new accounts, certainly the size of the county, I think it really is a great news story. There was nothing that we identified in the current year where we believe there was any areas of misstatement. So that's also a good news story. Moving on to control deficiencies, just to give the committee a little bit of overview of what a financial statement audit entails, we are required to gain an understanding of the significant controls around the financial reporting process. So to the extent we identify any significant deficiencies in the processes, we certainly are required to share with yourselves as committee members, being those charged with governance. So happy to report here today, no significant deficiencies were identified in that regard. However, if you have taken a look at some of the other items, we don't call them control deficiencies per se. I'd say more performance improvement observations, which is not uncommon, I would say, when you transition from one audit firm to another. We do have the benefit of having a fairly significant municipal practice, and we have lots of peer comparators to compare each other to in terms of what we see elsewhere. I won't go through each of the 4 observations in total, but I think the general spirit, I think from what we identified through the course of our work this year, not that anything is incorrect, I would say there's a fairly high level of manual processes that culminate into the financial reporting. Could there be some enhancements there in terms of digitization? Absolutely. I know management have concurred with our observations, and certainly we'll keep those on the slate for fiscal 2023 to see if any traction has been gained in any of those areas. Moving along to the financial statements, I know they're included as part of your package as well, but going into fiscal 2022, we knew there was no new accounting standards. So really the body and spirit of the financial statements themselves are fairly consistent with what you would have seen in previous years. We have somewhat adopted a little bit more of a KPMG typical financial statements, but certainly the content are very similar to what you would have seen in previous years. The one thing I will alert yourselves to that you will hear more about in fiscal 2023, there is a new accounting standard coming to the municipal sector, which is called asset retirement obligations, that actually will be quite significant to the sector. And I know certainly in conversations with management, we will make sure that we do make ourselves available to provide the support that they might require. It is a big one. New standards come along quite frequently. Generally speaking, they don't involve much work, but essentially today, the financial statements are not requiring management to accrue for items that will be incurred in the future related to any remediation type activities. We're seeing these for the March 31, 2023s. About 95% or more of this type of new liability under this new standard relates to the existence of any asbestos in buildings. So it will be somewhat of a comprehensive project to make sure that the inventory of these assets that are implicated by this standard are in scope, and then of course the financial exercise to determine what the liabilities will be. So that's a little bit of a preview. In this report, I've given you a little bit more information in terms of the standard itself, but certainly stay tuned. There will be more discussion coming forward. I will take you to the final couple of pieces I just wanted to mention. So in terms of our independence, in order for us to be engaged as your external auditor, we need to be very much mindful of our independence. So to the extent we might provide any non-audit services, we need to be upfront and transparent with respect to those. Pleased to report today there are no such services that might be thought to encroach on our independence. So that is a good news story as well. So all of these pieces really culminate into our single deliverable related to our engagement as your external auditor, which is the independent auditor's report. Again, it is in draft, subject to final approval by council, but it is a clean opinion that states that in our opinion, the financial statements do present fairly in all material respects the financial activities for the county for the year ended December 31, 2022. If you were to compare the body and content of this letter, virtually identical to the previous year, this is a standard report in Canada. However, we were required to include another matter comparative information paragraph this year to alert a user of the financial statements to say that even though we've audited the 2022 figures, we are relying on the work of the predecessor auditor for the ending 2021 balances, which then form part of our opening for 2022. And so with that, Madam Chair, I think this is a good place to stop. Those are really the highlights from my perspective. Welcome any comments or any feedback from the group.
Thank you. That was a great overview. And when I was reading them, I really appreciated sort of the executive summary. So that was very helpful. I'll open it up to questions, comments, concerns. The member from Amherst Bromley, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you through you to Ms. Huber on what we have done so far. My question is with respect to the audit misstatements, and I note that reading within that slide that it's not material to the consolidated financial statements, that it is a clean audit, but I'm wondering what the nature of that it was with respect to Safe Restart funding from 2021 and recognition. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that and just, what measures would be in place. Was that an interpretation issue as to how to recognize that, or if you could expand, please?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, I would say that was a common item when the different pockets of funding came through COVID and the Safe Restart programs. There was conversation in terms of, at the end of the day, from a financial reporting perspective, it's what are the performance criteria that might need to be required to support the revenue recognition. In this case, and I might perhaps need management to draw on their historical information because I think this amount might have spanned a few years. But essentially, the spirit of this individual amount was to say there weren't any real restrictions on the amount to the extent it wasn't spent. It would flow through your equity, if you will, and it could be reserved within your equity. I would say the County of Renfrew was not unique in their initial interpretation of this. We've seen this quite commonly across other municipalities. So again, the language from the province in some cases spoke to a reserve. Some interpret it to be an obligatory reserve without getting into a lot of detail. Obligatory reserves sit on your balance sheet, sit in deferred revenue versus reserves that are within equity. So it was a common misconception, I would say, more broadly in the sector. It is a one-time item. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, these programs no longer exist. From our audit perspective, irrespective of what the nature of the grants are, a lot of effort continues to be put on revenue recognition and the performance criteria for all grants across the board. So it certainly is something that is in scope for 2022 and will continue to be as part of our audit approaches moving forward.
Thank you for that. Supplementary, the member from Evanston Bromley, please.
Thank you much once again, Madam Chair, and thank you for the answer, Ms. Ubersol. Your comment that it is very technical and in the weeds, I concur like 1,000%. We have had those conversations in this room of how a thing is recognized, whether it's a reserve, whether it's deferred revenue, whether it's an obligatory reserve. It is enough to make one's head spin, but ultimately in this instance, is it correct then that this was recognized as a reserve when in fact it should have been at least a restricted reserve, if not deferred revenue?
So through you, Madam Chair, in the previous years, it is our opinion that the amount was not recorded correctly, and it has been adjusted for in the current year. So at the end of the year, this year, the balance sheet, which is really the disaggregation between your deferred revenue and your accumulated surplus, is correct.
Okay, anything further? Member from Evanston Bromley, please.
Thank you. Just, I wonder as well on Ms. Huber, or through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Huber, on the future implementation and the asset retirement obligations, just to prep us for the next one that we're going to see. And obviously, there's going to be probably, that you described this as not insignificant. There is going to be some gnashing of teeth and tearing of hair, I expect, in finance. As we move towards the end of this year and a year hence looking at this. So in very broad terms, what is it that we are now going to be required to do?
I will do my best to keep it as high level as I can. So what will need to take place is an inventory of assets where there are requirements to remediate those assets at some point in the future. So I think if we just look at buildings, looking across the inventory of buildings within the portfolio of assets, determining where the existence of asbestos might occur. We've been seeing, depending, and again, haven't had detailed conversations with the team, it's really determining where it might exist. The other thing for municipalities as well, to the extent there's any underground tanks, that would be something that would be in scope. To the extent there are lease agreements where you might need to remedy the leased premises to the original condition upon termination of the lease. Those are the types of things that would be in scope in this standard. Once the inventory has been determined, the mathematical exercise has taken place. Ultimately, what you will see on the statement of financial position, otherwise known as your balance sheet, you will see a liability in today's dollars related to those costs that are expected to come in the future. There are some transitional provisions that will allow you to run that initial impact through your equity, so it won't impact your in-year reported surplus deficit. So that's definitely a win. However, to the extent, and it is an estimate, as you can appreciate, it's not going to be perfect. It is an estimate. And so to the extent there are changes in the future, that will impact your reported surplus deficit. And to the extent it relates to buildings that are still in productive use, the other side of the entry actually goes to your tangible capital assets, and it will come through in amortization in the future. So it will be a big number. I think the important message to this group is that it's not necessarily something you need to budget for. I think the easiest way to think about it is if you think about your employee future benefit liability, that sits on your balance sheet because the financial framework requires it. However, it's not meant to be paid tomorrow. Same thing I would say in terms of the landfill. Landfill, as we know it now, will be part of asset retirement obligations. And again, I think from a council perspective, it won't necessarily impact your budgeting, but it will make the financial statements look and feel different. I don't have a sense yet as to the size and magnitude of what it will be for yourself, but I can tell you, if you think about school boards as a great example, they've had to do a lot of this work in advance, and I would say the numbers are not insignificant. I've seen numbers in the order of 30 to 50 million. Granted, they have a lot of buildings within their portfolio. I've seen hospitals and colleges this spring that have March year ends that could be in the magnitude between 5 and 15 million. So definitely going to be a material item. And I think from the audit perspective, it's not so much in the first year. It's getting the number right, of course, but certainly the process that management has undertaken to give us comfort in terms of completeness and on adoption. So that's just, I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of information that will come. It will look and feel different. So happy to have more conversation if anyone is interested on that front.
Thank you for that. I was just going to take Appendix 3 and give it to my local tier CAO. But this is very disappointing. We are almost halfway through 2023. And to introduce, they introduced PSAB, I think, halfway through a year as well. So I'm not sure what the point of it is. But anyway, member from Amherst Bromley, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm presuming that this was not initiated just now. I think that this probably was identified earlier, but in both of the examples, Madam Chair, that Ms. Hubers had presented, they are both of an environmental application with respect to underground tanks, with respect to asbestos. Is this essentially confined to environmental issues surrounding asset retirement?
Absolutely, through you, Madam Chair. So the spirit of the new standard is meant to say, what are the minimum requirements in terms of legislation and regulation with respect to those types of items? Yes. So I've been getting a lot of questions from communities to say, if we are contemplating an operational move in the future, does that get incorporated into the standard? No. So anything that's discretionary in nature? No. Anything that is non-discretionary in nature? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Is there anything further? Staff is happy? Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we look forward to meeting you at the end of the month and doing this all over again.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.
Bye. All right. And now we will turn it over to Mr. Kelly and page 2, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So starting on page 2 as the chair suggested, and then again on page 5 is a 2-page piece of information from the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. Of course, the Warden Peter Ema is the chair of the Wardens Caucus and has framed the 3 strategic priorities for the following year for the caucus: long-term care, paramedic services, and housing, of course. So you've heard over the last several months on the 7 and 7 housing plan that the Wardens Caucus is pushing forward in several presentations to municipal councils. The Wardens Caucus is due to present to this council likely in June. And at that point, Meredith Stavely Watson will present the priorities in fullness. But again, this is a piece of information that you can bring back to your local municipalities, and we share broadly on the priorities on a larger scale that we share with our 13 peers. Item number 2 is just a piece of information stemming from what was yesterday's conversation in the Health Committee about a Miramichi Lodge capital budget item, basically a shifting of dollars from one budget item to another to pay for unanticipated repairs on the HVAC system. So it's just more of a piece of information moving forward from yesterday. Thank you, Chair. I'll turn back to you before I head to resolutions.
Perfect. Thank you. So information item number 1. Information item number 2. Warden, please.
My apologies. I was just searching for another piece of paper, but I think I can go from memory. What's that? No, I'm good, thank you. And so, through you, Chair, to our committee and community, the strategic priorities, they're long-term. They're not easy fixes, and they've been framed by a series of federal and provincial decisions over probably the last 25 years in terms of attainable and affordable housing, and also, you know, we individually in the 13 municipalities that represent 1.26 million people across 103 municipalities, you know, we've had local fixes which have made our systems work until today. So it's going to be the Attainable and Affordable Housing Initiative 7007 you'll hear more about, but it's a pretty exciting, it's broad, it's big, it's fast acting if we get the support from the other two levels of government, and I think you'll be very pleased when you see it. But they're really going to have to buy in to the vision, and it plays on the strengths of the existing ERN projects. We brought them in as a manager, and it plays on the existing strengths of the broadband rollout in 2010, and now the cell project that's been very successful. And I think you're going to hear, and if you recall, the broadband project started off with a $70 million investment each from the federal and provincial government, and then it was leveraged. The expectation was that there would be a $70 million investment by the private partner, and I think it ended up being closer to about 120 by the time it was done, and we expanded the footprint of the project and included a number of industrial parks. So we'll get you some of that background information. So the success is there, and so we think we've got the right model, so you're going to hear a lot about that. Long-term care, again, we know that, and sitting in these chambers, we know that it's an issue, and it has been for years. The funding model, the staffing shortages, the other issue is for us the contract agencies that are coming in and scooping our staff, and that causes limitations and adds additional cost. So we're going to be focusing on that as we move forward. And then again, paramedic services. The Rubenstein report, which I think will be coming to council as well, speaks very strongly about it. We heard about it at Health yesterday. And and I have been pressing for some time and will continue. The money of offload delays is important. It's pegged at 17 million, but the most important piece is the time where our staff is tied up at the hospital while they could be doing something else that's more beneficial to our community. And then on top of that, there's the shadow time. The shadow time is how we backfill that. And just the delays in service because of that. So, the money's important, sure, but the time and the downtime where our staff aren't using their skill to benefit the community is important. And then you take a look at the future. And right now, our base cost is about $189 million across the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. And it's projected in 2028 to be nearly $260 million just for our base costs. So that rolls out. When you look at the report, you'll see a number jumps out. So we're going to need something like 65 additional crews. And we're not immune. We're not the only one. Ottawa, when you take a look at theirs, Ottawa's been very good to share their information. They're wasting 42 employees a day on offload delays. So that's a very significant issue for us, though. We think we can partner with the city. And that's not unusual. It's not Eastern Ontario only. When we talk at Roma and we talk at AMO, it's a pretty consistent message. So I think you're going to see and that's just one of the things. There's some talk about about change of practice in the paramedic paper as well. So very exciting to be bringing these forward. I think we can make transitional change, and we're getting some good, solid partnerships that we're developing as well. And we're hopeful the province will start to listen, because one of the strengths of the Wardens Caucus is bringing data and research and information and solutions, as opposed to whining in the corridors. And so I think with that kind of a history and the partnerships we've been able to develop with the MPs and the MPPs as well, I think I think we'll see change. Change won't happen fast, of course, because it took us 25 years to get to some of these spots. So I suspect it'll be a gradual change, but we're pretty good at gradual change. So I'm very excited about more information coming to you. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for the verbal update. And we did have an Eastern Ontario Regional Network meeting earlier this week, and the 7 and 7 was top of mind for everybody. So I know that EORN is very anxious to support the Wardens Caucus in this. Yes, the member from Deep River, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Strategic priorities. So attainable housing, that was certainly a question that was asked to me at my last council meeting, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of that information come forward. One of the things that came up was the fact that we tend to build or have attainable and affordable housing in the larger center in Renfrew County, and that's not uncommon, and that's where some of the need is, but that's not where all of the need is. And I think that when we're looking at this, I think that attainable affordable housing has to roll out to all of the 17 municipalities in Renfrew County. On long-term care, I'm hoping that this issue is fixed, rectified sooner than later, with a 96-bed long-term care center beginning construction in Deep River. This is going to add more pressure on North Renfrew Long-Term Care, Miramichi Lodge, and all of the homes in Renfrew County for staffing. You're looking at, I might have the number wrong, but in excess of 170 staff just for that facility. So where are they going to come from is a challenge. And on the third one, paramedics, in the news today is that Ottawa City Council is debating a staff recommendation today that they add 40 more paramedics per year over the next 3 years. So I don't know that that's enough, but I'm hoping that they move forward with that, and it might help a little bit. Thank you.
But there again, where are they finding them? Where are these magical staff coming from? Yes, Warden.
Thank you. To the third point, yes, we've been careful about what we ask for because that was always a worry. Ottawa, to their credit, Riley Brockington, who I sit with at AMO, is the chair, and he's been very good to share information, as has Mayor Sutcliffe. We've had some good conversations. And so I had seen their staff report probably 4 or 5 weeks ago on the understanding I wouldn't say anything about it. And when we met in June or May at the Warden's Caucus, I can't remember, when we had this first look at the Rubenstein report, that was one of the things identified was the 4 services surrounding Ottawa, we share a rotating, and I hate the word, rotating cast of part-time employees that go through all 3 or 4 of our services. And we're frankly worried that we're going to lose some of those staff to full-time jobs in Ottawa. And so I was reassured when they aren't going to run it and hire 120 or 130 right away. And there's also, if you look at their plan is that I think 30 of those are direct 100% funded positions from the province, and the province has shot that down already. So I don't think their plan is going to happen fast, and so we're aware of that. And so with regards to attainable housing, I think internally, Laura and Craig are very aware of the need to spread housing around, and so I think you'll see a plan come out in community services like that. But one that struggles for us is the feds and the province don't have a working definition of attainable housing. And so we're working on one right now. And so loosely what we say is it's adequate in condition, reasonably good shape without safety, electrical, rodent, and fire concerns, because I'm a very plain-spoken person, appropriate in size with enough bedrooms for the people in the household, reasonably priced, which allow lower and moderate income families to afford, and then available in a range of options to meet the housing needs of those in our community as their lives change. And then finally, we've added in, integrated in the community with service and amenity options nearby. So you don't plunk it in a cornfield like they did with the hockey rink and hope that somebody's going to, 25 years ago, hope somebody's going to build around you. So we've supplied that in very plain spoken language. This is what we're looking for, is an attainable, and then affordable housing already has a definition federally and then provincially, which almost meshes. And so we're hopeful that they'll take this and build on it. So it's like building a pizza. You put the crust down, then you start laying on lots of cheese and lots of other stuff. So that I can assure you that we're trying to do our things in a logical, straight line progression. But that's what I can offer you at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Amherst Bromley, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and perhaps to build upon the Warden's comments in responding to Councillor Doncaster, it's a chronic issue within long-term care staffing. I think, and I know it predated this, but I think it was 2017 when we actually engaged first with Algonquin College with the challenges that were before us then. In addition, as the member from Deep River has identified, so of course there is the enormous expansion in Deep River, but there is as well expansion at Marion Hill. There's expansion of Valley Manor in Barry's Bay, Arnprior Regional Hospital. The Grove has more beds. It is consistent with what we're seeing in long-term care already of, we're now going to hit that magical, ephemeral, ever-elusive 4 hours. But how are we going to find the people even to do that within the beds that we had? We have this expansion. We've had a chronic and long-standing health human resource challenge in long-term care. So I'm only raising this because something that's been 10 years in the making is not likely to meet that threshold that the member has suggested of quickly resolve this. Though I will point out, I did one day this week see a report from Colin DeMello that was pushed back. This was the financial officer for the province of Ontario that is essentially saying there's $22 billion available in the province somewhere that is unallocated right now. I think I could find a lot of places to allocate that. So that's with respect to long-term care. With respect to the paramedics, that's about to become chronic as well, for the very reasons that Councillor Doncaster has mentioned, and that the warden has also stipulated to. If you are going to expand your service, you are going to need more paramedics. These are going to be much more expansive in the health report that's going to come forward to County Council at the end of the month. One of the things that I was remiss perhaps yesterday, and I meant to do this, I did pass this on offline to Councillor Lafreniere. I'm wondering, Mr. Kelly, if I'm going to call it the Rubenstein report, the refresh of the report on the paramedic service that EOWC had commissioned in 2019. I'm wondering if that could be extracted. I think it did get distributed to all of council, the package from yesterday. But I think it would be valuable for that to be on the website as well as a standalone report that any member of the public can go and readily access. And I had encouraged Councillor Lafreniere to do the same in Pembroke. I think that would be very useful.
Chair, to answer that question through you, absolutely. That's the Warden's Caucus has accepted it, and it's now a public document. Obviously, we're all distributing it. I think actually this county is the first one actually to discuss it as it's just rolling out. So I'm happy to do so, or at least provide the link to the caucus page as well. So we'll take care of that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything for,
just one thing, and I don't have it open in front of me. My intent is not to put you on the spot, Warden, but I think that it's probably should throw some kudos to the actual firm I have referred to, and we have commonly referred to this as the Rubenstein Report. Apex Pro, I think perhaps was the name of the consulting agency, and certainly Mr. Rubenstein was the principal within that. So I certainly wanted to make sure that that was on the public.
If I might, it's Apex Pro Consulting Inc. and the principal was Merv Rubenstein, who was 30 years at least in the industry, and has completed the initial one in 2019. And I'm aware of arguing with him about Frontenac, Addington, Lennox ambulance service in Griffith, Mattawatchin some 20 years ago before that. So he's got a lot of experience.
And now you're buddies.
He's always been right.
Yeah. The member from North Algonquin Wilberforce, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the warden. I'm just curious, the arrangement that we were able to negotiate with the hospitals, having somebody from paramedic staff in the emergencies for offloads, is that a viable option moving forward, or was that just a temporary solution to get some of our ambulances back on the road so they're not sitting at hospitals waiting?
I will offer a personal comment and then turn it over to the professionals. So to me, having worked in the hospital up until November and then attending the hospital, I think it's a valuable and viable option as long as the funding is there from the province. The struggle, I think, for some of the hospitals in Ontario right now, and we have 5 hospitals in Renfrew County, is I think we're able to demonstrate the value, and I think the uptake might be a little slower at the province because the health dollars. But on a personal note, and just observing it as another professional wandering through the ER on a regular basis, it makes a lot of sense, and I would dare say the staff in the hospitals appreciate it from the comments that I'd heard, sitting at the nursing stations doing my work. So we'll turn it over to the pros.
Member from that.
I guess.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, member from North Elgin-Wilberforce, maybe a question for County Council when the chief is here. Do you want to try and go for it?
Yeah, I can provide certainly some very high level comments on that. Viable is a kind of an uncertain term, because I think that what we're seeing, and I'm going to first predicate this. Just this morning, I saw data from an Abacus poll that was run in April right across the country. And of course, we're all aware of the housing issue, homelessness, inflationary pressures. But the health system is a key concern right across the country, that there is enormous anxiety about what we're seeing with respect to the closures of ERs, some hospitals struggling, the health human resource issue that is across the spectrum, certainly most acutely, I think, in long-term care. So perhaps it's a nuanced answer, which is to say, I am glad it's there because there is no backstop after that. For those who are paying close attention, this has been put in place to ensure the continuity of the system and the health of the residents. Certainly here in Renfrew County, that is our concern, but more broadly, of course. But there's nothing standing behind that. So is it viable? There would be a systemic change that we're going to recognize paramedics in the hospitals, but for what it's doing right now is buttressing the system to ensure that we're carrying forward. One of the things that I had commented on my own notes on the Apex Pro document yesterday was that my image of the offload delays is almost akin to portable classrooms in schools. These were not intended as triage or ER rooms. They're intended, and in fact, the Ambulance Act defines them as vehicles that are prepared to travel to for those who have acute illness, injury, etc. And when they're sitting at a hospital, they are completely useless. That's not what they were built for. It's like a ship sitting in port. It does nothing. It's safe, but it does nothing. So the viability, there's a lot, and Chief Nolan, I'm sure, will expound on this at the end of the month, should you ask that question then, Councillor Brose. It's working right now, and it's a stopgap solution at this point, and I'm very glad that it is there. Whether that is going to be the continuing model, there's uncertainty around that, but it certainly needs to be addressed.
It's a very interesting question, though. Let's see what Chief Nolan has to say, because I mean it's a fairly new program for us, sort of a pilot project. So, all right. Is there anything further on 1? All right. Now we're going to move to 2, the Miramichi Lodge budget. All right. Mr. Kelly, back over to you, please, for resolutions.
Thank you, Chair. As per the norm, I'll read the recommendation to get it on the floor, and then we'll go for the background afterwards. So that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that County Council authorize staff to join the Canoe Procurement Group of Canada / the LAS Group Procurement Program effective July 1st, 2023 to take advantage of public sector group purchasing opportunities when it is beneficial for the county to do so.
Thank you. I'll ask for a mover and seconder, please, to get it on the floor. Warden, member from Amherst Bromley. Mr. Kelly, a little background, sure.
I'll do a bit of a background to expound upon what's in the report. So committee, of course, hopefully will recall in May the delegation from the Canoe Group, who expanded on the opportunities that we could take advantage of, including purchasing of plow trucks down to IT use and several items in between. So the County of Renfrew, over the course of several years, has already been involved with LAS. We buy bulk purchase natural gas with them. We use investment opportunities through One Investment in the finance department, and have a good track record with LAS. Secondly, the Canoe Group is used by several municipalities across Canada, as you heard during the delegation, and has been tested as being fully compliant with trade agreements in Canada. So of course they deal with the competitive bid process themselves and have found vendors of record, which saves us time and a substantial amount of energy when we're procuring some of these very large items. And to note, as we've heard it often, is that they also work with local retailers as well. So that was a key point that we brought forward, is that they would at least reach out to local retailers when and where possible. So again, as noted in bullet point 4, there's no cost to join and no membership fees, and it allows us to do some research before even using them. We could use them as a piece of information and still decide if we want to go out and RFP on our own. So staff believes this is a progressive way forward and are seeking your support to enact this as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just one comment. It's a shame that they don't do fleet. That was the one thing I was hoping for, but Warden, please.
So I have 3 questions. The first question is, because I believe that our local municipalities automatically belong to AMO because of the county's membership. So does this include all of our local? No, we don't.
That's FCM, I think you're referring to.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. All right. So then to amend my question, can the local municipalities participate under the county's declaration, because it talks about you have to declare it and put it on your website, or do we have to individually do one? The second piece is, are we aware if municipal corporations, some of us own power generation and distribution, and they're 100% owned, whether they can participate under the umbrella of the county and or our own individual declaration? And then the third question is, are we able to purchase on behalf of bodies that serve the community as a not-for-profit, should we belong under the county or our own declaration? So thank you. I actually stayed awake thinking about this last night.
That's I never even thought about our dams. That's very interesting. Can this be answered? Excellent.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and through you. The municipalities, and I would include your power corporations in this as well, they are separate legal entities, so they would have to enter those separate agreements amongst themselves. Now, your municipalities are one thing. Your other legal entities, they may or may not operate like a municipality, like Ottawa Valley Waste, for example, operates, or the airport operate like a municipality. So if they're a municipal corporation, they may be able to belong to this. That would have to be answered by LAS specifically. With reference to being a middleman or a reseller, I would suggest that's probably not in the spirit of this agreement, but again, that's something we'll have to check out. Oh my gosh, it might get us into a situation where we're buying something and then declaring it surplus almost immediately to dispose of it to a nonprofit. But again, we can clarify these points before County Council.
Thank you.
That'd be wonderful. Member from Almaston Bromley, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and perhaps to augment Mr. Kelly's response, our township did join up with Canoe, and what was the final selling point? I mean, it is there are a lot of advantages to be had. For us, the thing that was most satisfying was that often the pricing is achieved through Canoe, but it is our local distributor that actually is doing the provision, the delivery of the materials. So we have joined in Admaston Bromley. I'm assuming the same would be so of Renfrew. With respect to any of the other stuff, the other questions, to be more specific, Mr. McClendon is very effusive. He is, again, a proselytizing evangelical on behalf of LAS. but he is more than forthcoming, and I think that those questions he can probably answer inside of a minute. And perhaps even if the specific that you are seeking, Warden Emo, for your home municipality, perhaps there is an alternate way to structure some things that might be achievable. I know it's a fairly broad sector that is included in the eligibility for this, but that's probably going directly to source you may find to be more valuable than coming through the county of Renfrew.
Thank you.
But I would like the questions answered at County Council, because I think that there are many of us that would like to know the answers broadly. So thank you for that. Anything further on number 3? Then I will call for the vote. All in favor? And number 4, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, to deal with a delegation of authority, is that the recommendation that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that County Council approve that the Chief Administrative Officer Clerk be given delegated authority for the month of July to approve consultant appointments and contract awards that would normally require committee and/or council approval. This approval is contingent on the appointments and contract awards being within approved funding allocations, and that there are no irregularities associated with the procurement process.
Thank you. Can I ask for a mover and seconder, please, to get it on the floor? Moved by the member from North Algona Wilberforce, second by the member from Killaloe, Haggerty and Richards. Comments, questions, concerns? All in favor? Excellent. May I ask for a mover and seconder for the administration report as a whole? Moved by the member from Houston Bromley, second by the member from North Algona Wilberforce. Anything further on the administration report? All in favor? Thank you. And now I will turn it over to Mr. Does anybody need 5? Everyone's good? Okay. I will move on to Mr. Foss and the Corporate Services report. Thank you.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 1 under information items, really just an update, some activities with respect to the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus Treasurers Meeting. I chair that particular group because of the chair of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus being our own.
And you're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So we held a meeting just last week on Thursday, June the 8th. It's actually, it's an excellent opportunity for the treasurers to get together. The last few years, of course, we've been doing this virtually. And so there was a groundswell of support to attempt to get all of us into a room. And so we met at a central location in Belleville, and 11 of 13 members attended, and we had a wonderful session. There was 27 items on our agenda. We worked very hard at getting through the list. It was probably one of the longest agendas that I've ever seen. Anyways, just a bit of an update. We had an excellent networking session last week on Thursday. Item number 2, an update on some of the activities taking place within our Human Resources Department. So on June the 6th, members of our HR staff attended 2 separate career fairs. Our manager, Greg Belmore, as well as our Human Resources Coordinator, Amanda Nesbitt, attended the Shaw Centre in Ottawa for a career fair hosted by Jobs Fair Canada, and had well over a dozen employers present. At the same time, another Human Resources Coordinator, Brady Smith, attended the Canadian Armed Forces Second Career Assessment or Assistance Network session right here in Petawawa. And so in keeping with our strategic initiatives of workforce development and recruiting efforts, we are doing all that we can to ensure that we put our best foot forward whenever an opportunity presents itself from a recruiting point of view. Item number 3, just a chart on our provincial offenses workload, as well as item 4, provincial offenses administration backlog. These information items come on a monthly basis to this group. And certainly related to that is item number 5, which is Provincial Offences Administration Prosecutor Update. And we are really, I'm very pleased today, Madam Chair, to have with us not only our manager, Ashley Wilton, from our Provincial Offences Court, but also our municipal prosecutor, Ms. Tara Lee Hay. We did announce in an earlier report to this committee that we were very happy to have Tara Lee join our team. Has some extensive experience within the provincial offences courts, albeit a little farther east of this area in the city of Ottawa, but really pleased to have Tara Lee join with us. Item number 5, Madam Chair, under the direction of the Local Crown's Office and following an initiative by Eastern Ontario Region, provincial offences prosecutors began reviewing cases for implications under Section 11B of the Charter, where a defendant has a right to be tried within a reasonable time frame. And that presumptive ceiling of reasonable time frame has been considered to be an 18-month period. And because of COVID-19 and because of the challenges that took place with the closure of courts, the transition to virtual courts, which of course this committee is aware that we jumped on as quickly as we possibly could, dealing also with the shortage of the justice of the peaces and having a number of our court dates canceled, we certainly are in the same position as many of our peers within Eastern Ontario at having a significant delay in bringing these matters forward to court. The result of this direction is the disposal of approximately 500 Part 1 and Part 3 charges within the County of Renfrew in the first 5 months of the year. The majority of those charges are falling within the Highway Traffic Act and the Compulsory Automobile Insurance Act. I wonder, Madam Chair, if it's all right with you, I might just ask if our brand new municipal prosecutor might just take a few minutes and explain in much greater detail, as she can and I cannot, for the committee, just a little bit of what's taking place within the sector and why. I have talked to her ahead of time about this. This is not something that I've just surprised her with this morning. And so, Madam Chair, without further ado, I would ask her just to update the committee.
Welcome to the County of Renfrew. Who wants to live in the city of Ottawa anyway? Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Foss. Actually, I've been a resident of the County of Renfrew for 15 years, but been making the commute into Ottawa, so I'm happy to be home. So that's that. Just to start with that, it's very nice to be home. And so I do have extensive knowledge within the court system, and COVID-19 did, in fact, become, the major shift in how the courts operated. For approximately 150 years, the courts ran their business in the same model, in the same fashion, and it worked. However, COVID-19 became a discrete event, is what they're calling it in legalese terms. And any cases that occurred just before COVID-19, during the pandemic, were protected by being determined to have this discrete event time frame, having protect them from any 11B sort of charter issues. We're moving beyond that, and of course, the courts are like a machine. Cases are leaving the court every day, and cases are coming in the court every day. So it's a consistent uptake of constant movement in the court. And then the pandemic occurred, and the movement stopped essentially, or slowed down, halted to, the pace that we had never seen before. So now that we've moved beyond the pandemic, and the cases that are coming into the court now are no longer protected by this discrete event, and so we have to establish what can the court actually feasibly prosecute, or how many cases can they actually hear. So that was where the determining factor came in for the review of all cases up to December 2021 for provincial offenses, Part 1s, 2s, and 3s. So that's inclusive of any ticket, summons, information, parking ticket. Each of these cases were reviewed specifically and individually for cases of personal injury, death, or recidivism. If there was evidence of any of those 3 items, the matter was proceeded, and so that was why the number is quite small, only about 500 in this jurisdiction. Comparatively to Ottawa, I just left that jurisdiction, and the backlog in that jurisdiction, comparatively to our jurisdiction here in Renfrew, is enormous. I couldn't put a number on it, but it is at least 5 or 6 times what our backlog is here. Of course, the numbers are big, but they also have the same lack of resources and whatnot. But in this jurisdiction, being able to jump onto into the virtual court right away, as Jeff had mentioned, was definitely a help. And so it's the impact of the backlog. We're sort of starting to move beyond that, and we're running cases just as we would prior to COVID.
Thank you. Mr. Foss, back over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 6 is our last information item, and just an update on the MCMA conference. And Ashley Wilton, again, who's here with us today, attended that conference May 15th through to 17th, and just noting a number of the highlights, if you will, from that particular conference, ensuring that our Provincial Offences Court continues to network and dialogue with other courts on these important issues. As Tara Lee had said, we operated very much the same within our court system for a long, long time. And what we are seeing now in this sector, as we are with many, many sectors, is substantial change. And we want to ensure that our courts are aware of it and staying on top of these issues as they come forward. So with that, Madam Chair, before I move to resolutions, back to you.
Thank you. So we'll go back to information item number 1, the caucus's treasurers meeting. Boy, Peter being the chair is just the gift that keeps on giving.
I'm rather proud of that.
Remember,
Who knew you'd make a career out of that, Jeff?
See, I was only the lowly vice chair, so I didn't bother Jim or Paul. Yes, member from Abbotston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm wondering, perhaps the warden can answer this. I just referred to the map that was presented in the priorities for the EOWC, and certainly in my geography, I'm hard-pressed to identify how Belleville would be considered a central location. Is there something behind how we arrive at Belleville being central?
Well, I think, if I remember correctly, the auditors are located in Belleville, firstly, and then secondly, also most of the ERN functions are conducted out of Belleville. I know my friends in Prescott, Russell mentioned Central on a regular basis, so.
So if I may, Madam Chair, then, so it's not so much geographical, because I would think that de Riviere might be as central to the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus as perhaps Belleville?
Yeah, I think I've covered it as best I can.
I've had that argument at Eorn.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Anything else on no? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Foss.
Just thought, thanks, Madam Chair. I just, at the end of our meeting, I did indicate that as the chair, I had the ability to determine location of the meeting, and so I asked how many of the 11 in the room would be willing to travel to the county of Renfrew late in the fall for our next meeting. And after the crickets, there were no other hands that went up.
I'm still trying to figure out how I got the Roma retreat in Zone 6, so I only had to drive 3 hours. It took some people 2 days to get to Prince Edward County. Yes, member from Abbotston Bromley.
Well, I want to congratulate Mr. Foss, because I can imagine, in a much smaller group, you can get an enormous amount of business done at that meeting in the fall that we will be hosting here in Pembroke.
It would just be Jeff going, what do you think, Jeff? I don't know. What do you think, Jeff? All right. Number 2, the career fairs. Just a quick question to Mr. Belmore. Were there any operators for our roads equipment at any of those career fairs? Oh, Lee's not paying attention to me.
Through you, Madam Chair, we definitely did promote the roads positions that were open, and all the positions, not only at the county, but at the lower tier municipalities that are advertised on our website. We were encouraging folks that, viewing the Renfrew County website was one-stop shopping for actually 18 different corporations at the same time. So it was well worth the applicants' time to view our career site because it covers such a wide range of area.
Okay, well, I will now have to add to your website because I lost an operator. Anything further on 2? All right, the POA workload. The POA backlog. Everybody's favorite topic. Member from Almaston Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with your indulgence, I'm going to kind of draw in item 5 as well. And I wanted to certainly thank Ms. Hay for her report and welcome her here to the County of Renfrew in her professional capacity and here to this committee meeting. So a couple of questions. So first, and I cannot remember the terminology, but essentially the COVID protected, that is an exemption or that does provide some more latitude. I'm assuming that that's not open-ended either. At some point, there is still a requirement, is there not, for a relatively speedy access to justice. The second question it comes back then to item number 4. So if you see the number of courts originally scheduled through the first 5 months and then the number of courts canceled, we've canceled, I think, just about 39% of our court dates. So in COVID, I understood why we were generating a backlog. This is now, I'm presuming, exclusively due to the human resource, the staffing of JPs. We are no longer in a pandemic. I'm not sure when the Ministry of the Attorney General, may have said, okay, we're outside now of that protection of COVID, but presumably we are. So this seems to be a substantial. I note that the backlog number, the total backlog number, is reduced about 200 over the course of the year, but still I am concerned how long this may be cascading if we are still routinely seeing over a third of our court dates having to be vacated because of a lack of access to JP.
Okay, and I can, thank you, Madam Chair. And so with relation to the discrete event that we called COVID-19, that's a terminology that was handed down and utilized by the higher levels of court. So when Mr. Foss talks about the sealing, the 11B sealing, the time in which a matter should proceed to trial. That's established through a Court of Appeal case called Jordan, and the Jordan case establishes a calculation that one must do. So you're correct in that it was not impertuitous, that there was an end point, and so now that COVID is no longer a factor to that calculation, there's no longer the protection. Secondly, with relation to the closure of courts, and that's simply to do with the lack of justice of the pieces. And there was, if I can explain it this way, when you get appointed to the bench, there is a specific amount of time in which there's a training process that you go through. About 18 months of sitting on the bench with a mentor, and then you ease your way into certain simple hearings. There was a class of justices that had just been appointed just before COVID. So I'm sure, as you can appreciate, that class spent 2 years not getting any education. So there's that backlog. Although the county is now at full complement, we now have 2 full-time justices of the peace that have been appointed. There's still going to be that time in which we have to wait until they're prepared to hear cases. And unfortunately, COVID just was part of that time lag.
Thank you for that. So the JP conversation in this chamber has been going on for, you wouldn't even, and one of our frustrations Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. And we apologize for our technical difficulties for anybody in the YouTube nation that might be watching us. The date of our next meeting is Thursday, August 17th, 2023. So we get a month off, but I know everybody's looking around going, ha ha ha, a month off doesn't happen. Looking forward to one of those special meetings of council, Craig. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn, please. Mover and seconder. Moved by the member from North Wilberforce, second by the member from Killaloe, Hegarty, and Richards. All in favor. We are adjourned.